Hello, my name's Amy Foster. I'm a stormwater coordinator for the city of Coralville. Today I'm going to talk with you about a bioretention cell that's been installed on a gas station site. We're going to talk about design, installation, and the maintenance of this cell. This cell was designed in accordance with the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual and using design methods from that manual. I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of those methods look like when they're installed in the field. So here's the bioretention cell. It's planted in native vegetation. It's taking runoff from the gas station parking lot and the fueling areas. The cross section here is 12 inches of rock with a perforated tile. On top of that, we have 18 inches of amended soil mix. That mix is 80% sand, 10% compost, and 10% topsoil. At the bottom of this cross section, there is an impermeable membrane, which means it does not allow water to infiltrate past the soil amendments in the rock base. And the reason for that is because we're at a gas station. So when that water comes in, it's getting filtered through this bioretention cell, but at this location, we're not promoting infiltration past those layers because we want to be cautious and careful to not pollute our groundwater sources. So on top of that amended soil, we have a 2 to 3 inch mulch layer. The designer of this bioretention cell also opted to add a mat on top. And this is an open weave jute mat. And the reason he did that is because he was concerned with mulch floating. So the mulch that we used here was a shredded hardwood mulch. And I think that works pretty well, but the mat was just kind of an extra precaution that designer felt more comfortable doing. So this is something different that you might not see on other sites, but I think it's worked out pretty well. Ponding depth in here is 9 inches. So once the water comes in, it will rise up to 9 inches. If we have a larger storm, above that 9 inches, we'll go over the overflow. And that overflow is this direction. So here we have the concrete box, holes in the side at the 9 inch mark. And because this is a gas station site, we also have an emergency stop valve within the structure. And that's down here, and what it actually does is, say there should be a large spill here, gasoline, it would be directed into this cell because this is where everything flows to. So if the fire department was called out for a large spill, they would be able to come over here and shut down that tile structure. So as we talked about before, within the rock chamber here is a perforated tile, and that tile is tied into that box. So it's important to be able to shut that tile down should we receive a large pollutant load. The next thing I'm going to show you is our pretreatment area. So here's our pretreatment area. Turf grass is used to filter out some of those sediments prior to reaching the bioretention cell. That helps make the lifetime of the bioretention cell longer. So it, in the end, saves you money having a pretreatment area. This is turf grass, and then on top of the turf grass is a plastic mat called scour stop. And this is anchored in to help hold the turf grass down. Scour stop is a good product, but installation is very important. If the anchors are not installed correctly, it can actually cause more erosion and more damage to the pretreatment area. Let's talk about maintenance. So the maintenance of this bioretention cell is first and foremost at the pretreatment area. So as sediment builds up, and you can see a little bit of sediment building up here, it is broomed off into a dustpan and taken away probably twice a year. So spring and fall is when you get those larger loads. But should something happen, like say there is somebody doing some maintenance here, adding some trees, and they drop some topsoil, and that accumulates, you might need to do it more than 2 times a year should you have a small spill like that. Another part of maintenance is ensuring that the grass is mowed here so that it's short enough to allow water to get in. You don't want it to get too high and then it backs up and it pools into the parking lot. As far as the vegetation goes, this cell is 2 years old. So what we're doing right now for weeding is weeding once a month. And it's pretty easy, and I really think that this mat helps a lot with the weeds as well. But weeding once a month, pulling out plants that are not part of this planting. And at this point, it's pretty easy to see a weed or a plant that isn't part of this. You know, it's planted in rows. It should be pretty obvious to who's ever doing the maintenance. So weeding, we don't recommend spraying if at all possible. And then at the end of the year, we come here and we would cut everything down. I prefer to leave up the grasses. I think that it gives a little bit of fall and winter interest to the planting. So I leave the grasses in the fall, but cut everything else down. And then in the spring, come back and cut off the grasses. Remulching as necessary, but I don't think remulching is something that has to be done every year. And the biggest part of maintenance is also observation. So this cell is designed to have a 48-hour drain down time. So that means if we have a rain event and after 48 hours we still have water ponding in here, we know there's a problem. We know there is maintenance needed. And that maintenance may be, maybe there's some sediment that's accumulated on top that needs to be removed. I hope not, and if you have a good install, and are watching the rest of your area, making sure that there's no spills of sediment or things that could clog the cell, you should never need to do that. But the most important part is observing what's going on in the cell, and there could be a time, you know, later on, hopefully 30 or 40 years down the road when you would need to come in and actually do maintenance of the soils.